2019 Cooper Year-End Video. 2019 is the 16th year of creating year-end videos.
We start with December 2018, where Tony and Cheryl made a trip to Napa. As far as they can remember, it was a trip just because it is Napa, and Napa has wine. What other reason do you need?
Being December, Tony got to fly his pinata rocket for the kids.
Got them all! Watch, there's one, and two! You can go! Don't be a lemming!
Tony and Kevin ate dead animal and drank used motor oil together. They seem to like it a lot.
Another night, and Kevin and Tony are at it again. Tonight's menu, dead birds and more used motor oil.
Tony and Cheryl went to a lot of concerts this year. Let's start counting them. At number 1, on New Year's Eve, Bob, Tony and Cheryl ate a cheeseburger before seeing Creedence Clearwater Revisited concert. Walking to work one morning in January, Tony took a picture of the moon, Venus and Jupiter all in alignment. You will need a large display to see Venus.
The Cooper family gathered for Christmas/the New Year. Aunt Lois could not attend. She is famous for her X's and O's in all her posts, letters and emails. We tried to return the message with our fingers. Monster Jam World Finals moved to Florida this year. The Cooper family decided to use the Oakland Monster Jam as a substitute. At the last minute, Tony had to go to Iowa to help his dad after John fell and broke his hip.
How does this make sense? Tony traded monster trucks for snow.
While Tony helped John to relocate to Oklahoma, he was able to renew friendships with Aunt Rachel, Uncle Tommy, and cousins Lori and Larry. Uncle Tommy and Tony found time to do a little shooting.
Back in California, Tony and Kevin saw a Heineken commercial featuring Guns N' Roses. They had to make a parody of it featuring some very dark beer. Various wines make the glasses sing nicely. A pumpkin ale is not bad at all. They rehearsed once, but failed to rehearse when to cut the music. You will have to forgive the post-production edit. They tried once with a goblet of dark beer, but the goblet shattered when the goblet reached resonance. Used motor oil in a frosty mug sets the tone perfectly. Kevin was a little late on his timing. Time to add pizza. Tony pooped at a mug of dark beer keeps seeming while being rubbed against your chin.
End of March, and Tony and Cheryl make a return trip to Napa.
While in Napa, they also toured a nearby petrified forest. Shooting with Uncle Tommy renewed an interest in guns. While Tony was happy to borrow a weapon, Kevin started collecting guns. They do have a good time shooting.
Concert number 2. Tony and Cheryl attended a Kansas concert. Tony was happy he didn't cry during Carry On My Wayward Son.
Another Snow Ranch rocket launch and another successful pinata rocket flight.
Being a 2-day launch, Tony got to fly a second time.
April 29th, Tony's uncle, James Anthony D. Mayo, succumbed to his battle against dementia. He had served in the U.S. Air Force and Navy Reserves. He had an excellent eye for art and owned his own gallery. He enjoyed fabricating things of whimsy like a 3-wheeled trike and a 15-foot-tall Mickey Mouse. He is missed by all who knew him.
May brings concert number 3, Tony and Cheryl took Kevin Chizoso, a Led Zeppelin tribute band.
A week later in concert number 4. 3 days of bottle rock. Does this count as 1, 3 or 30 concerts? The third day was a little wet.
Kevin bought another gun, then got Crystal to pose with it in her furry costume.
Lois and Peggy cooperated enough to attach a dedication to a quilt made by Nancy Melinda Shelby Emery. It was delivered to Alaska.
Another beer night at BJ's Brewhouse. Bob could not make it this time.
Tony met up with an old Navy buddy whom he had not seen in nearly 30 years. They shared some nachos and a couple beers.
Father's Day came along and Tony, Bob, Kevin and Cheryl took a beer cruise on the bay with Hornblower yachts.
Concert number 5 and it is Made in USA. A tribute band to Iron Maiden.
For many years, Tony was torn between installing a whole house fan or an attic fan. There is R30 insulation in the attic and it typically keeps the house 10 degrees cooler than the outside temperature even with the attic being near 130. Tony decided that if he could keep the attic cooler it should keep the house cooler. The solar-powered attic fan meant no wiring and it automatically turns on with high humidity or temperature in the attic over 82 degrees. Tony had to decide where to install it. He decided to replace one of the current roof vents.
Concert number 6, Brit Floyd, a Pink Floyd tribute band. If you like Pink Floyd, Tony cannot recommend Brit Floyd enough. He did not keep a dry eye during the performance of Great Gig in the Sky.
Cheryl's company held a manager retreat where she accepted an award for her office's safety record. In August, Tony, Cheryl, Nick and Kathy took a trip to Scotland. The first night and they found the pub in the hotel. Tony had no trouble finding Guinness everywhere in Scotland. It helped to fight off the 9 hours of time zone changes. By the way, did you know that the unicorn is the national animal of Scotland?
Day 1 in Scotland and they decided to visit Culloden battlefield where in 1746, the British government crushed the Jacobite uprising. The gang posed at a monument in the battlefield. Cheryl liked the yaks at the battlefield. Being Scotland, it rains frequently. It was predicted to be 80% chance of rain for the day. Somehow it was sunny that morning. Tony being 94% Irish and 6% vampire, one of them caught fire because Tony burned his nose to a bloody appendage. In the afternoon, they decided to visit Fort George. Following the victory at Culloden, the British built Fort George, the mightiest artillery fortification in Britain. They explored the guns, buildings and TARDIS time machines. 2 sites on the same day were not enough for these tourists. They also made a stop at Castle Inverness. Inverness Castle sits on a cliff overlooking River Ness in Inverness, Scotland. The red sandstone structure, displaying an early castellated style, today was built in 1836. Today it is a courthouse and prison. This was the view from one of the watchtowers where they could all fit in the shot. They finished the evening at Castle Tavern with a few drinks and a meal.
Day 2 in Scotland and they started a road trip to John O'Groats on the northern tip of Scotland. First stop, Dunrobin Castle. A stately home in Sutherland, in the Highland area of Scotland, and the family seat of the Earl of Sutherland and the Clan Sutherland. It overlooks the Dornoch Firth. They toured the castle, watched a falconer and took lots of photos before motoring down the road. They noticed a fishing port and just stopped for the view. The women found a waterfall to pose with. Next up is Castle Sinclair Grenigo on the east coast of Caithness, Scotland. It is considered to be one of the earliest seats of Clan Sinclair. It comprises the ruins of 2 castles, the 15th century Castle Grenigo and the early 17th century Castle Sinclair. Nick got to operate his drone around the ruins. He did get some nice footage. They spent over an hour wandering around the ruins. This happens to be one of Tony's favorite memories of Scotland. That and the Guinness stout beer that was plentiful throughout Scotland. By 7 p.m. they made it to John O'Groats, a village 2.5 miles northeast of the village of Canisbay, Caithness, in the far north of Scotland. It was late on a Sunday, but they still found a few open shops and got to check a point of interest off their list.
Day 3 in Scotland and more road tripping. Along the way, they drove around Loch Ness. They kept a watchful eye out for Old Nessie. They made it to Clan Cameron Museum, ancestors of Cathy's. Aiknacry, that is Scottish Gaelic, for Field of the Fish Trap, is a small hamlet, private estate, and a castle in the Lochaber region of Highland, Scotland. The settlement has a long association with Clan Cameron. Sir Ewan Cameron of Lochiel built the original Aiknacry Castle about 1655. The current castle was built in 1802. While on site, they did some hiking and viewed the sights, including a fish hatchery and some waterfalls. They ate at the Boathouse restaurant, where Tony discovered beer cacled darkness from the local brewery, Loch Ness. Only Tony claimed to see the Loch Ness monster. But that was after 3 pints of the local beer called Dark Ness. Tony recommends Dark Ness beer for the serious monster hunters. As Tony was recovering from his visions, they stopped at Falls of Foyers, a waterfall on the River Foyers, which feeds Loch Ness, in Highland, Scotland. The waterfall has a fine cascade, having a fall of 165 feet. It is located on the lower portion of the River Foyers. They hiked and viewed the falls. Nick and Tony went much further down the falls to view from the bottom.
Day 4 started a long cross-country drive. Made it to the west coast of Scotland. Tony took a selfie of a beach in the distance. They stopped at an artist village before making the trek to the beach. In case you were lost, there was a signpost to guide you near an old church ruin. The church did have one thing going for it. It knew better than Bart about how to keep out fare evaders. When they made it back to the hotel, Cheryl and Kathy discovered a spiced rum called Kraken. They drank the bar's entire supply of Kraken. As you might guess, they got pretty wasted. Even the bartender joined in their shenanigans. For the remainder of the trip, they kept chanting "Release the Kraken." Actually, they haven't stopped chanting it yet. Just to even out the story, it was closing time, and the bartender called last call. Tony asked for a wheelbarrow of Guinness. Panicking, he made sure the bartender knew he only wanted one more. Bartender brought 2 more, and Tony may have been seeing Loch Ness monsters, unicorns and krakens. Yay, he was pretty drunk too.
Day 5 and they stayed local to Inverness. Because they all knew that, in general, Tony doesn't take photos that do not include someone he knows, they took several photos with Tony in the frame. After browsing, they attempted to go dolphin watching. There is a lighthouse that is famous for dolphins as the tide turns. They missed the dolphins, but still had a good time looking around.
Day 6 was moving day. They were changing location from Inverness to Isle of Skye, which meant most of the day driving. One of Tony's high school classmates insisted that he needed to try out a local delicacy, Lafroig. It is a single malt Scotch whisky considered as an extremely well-balanced, characteristic and exuberant whisky. Often described as deeply smoky and peat-tasting. Tony agrees that it is a very strong flavor. He drank it more than once. They did stop at the ferry pools at the Isle of Skye, where Tony saw this vintage Opel GT he had to ask to photograph. The trail out to the ferry pools was a 5-mile round-trip hike. Tony and Cheryl made it 2 miles out, according to Tony's fitness tracker, when they turned back. They took a lot of panorama photos at the many pools they passed.
Day 7 and the crew made a stop at Ilion, a small tidal island where 3 sea lochs meet, Loch Duich, Loch Long and Loch Alsh, in the Western Highlands of Scotland. A picturesque castle that frequently appears in photographs, film and television dominates the island, which lies about 1 kilometer from the village of Dorney. They took a tour of the castle and took some photos. Later that night, after Tony drank some more Guinness beer, a bobby escorted him home.
Day 8 and the family moved to Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland. They took several photos of the Scott and David Livingstone monuments. Tony loves to get into the same photo multiple times when taking panoramas or photospheres. Photospheres look a lot better on the web or on phones than being added to a movie. On the food and whiskey tour, Tony also found a really dark beer called Old Engine Oil. He could have drank a crankcase full of it.
Day 9 and they spent the day walking around Edinburgh, specifically Edinburgh Castle in the centre of town. Ross Fountain is a cast-iron structure located in West Princess Street Gardens, Edinburgh. It was installed in 1872 and restored in 2018.
Day 10 and traveling again. First stop, the Kelpies, 30-meter-high horsehead sculptures depicting Kelpies, standing next to a new extension to the Forth and Clyde Canal. They drove on to Falkirk where Tony got to see the wheel. The Falkirk Wheel is a rotating boat lift in central Scotland, connecting the Forth and Clyde Canal with the Union Canal. The lift is named after Falkirk, the town in which it is located. It reconnects the two canals for the first time since the 1930s. It opened in 2002 as part of the Millennium Link project. On to Stirling Castle where they acted like tourists. Stirling Castle, located in Stirling, is one of the largest and most important castles in Scotland, both historically and architecturally. The castle sits atop Castle Hill, an intrusive crag, which forms part of the Stirling Sill geological formation. Later they spied an Irish bar and decided to appeal to Tony's dominant Irish heritage. While the fish and chips were excellent, Tony got a couple more Guinness beers.
Day 11 and they are in Glasgow staying close to the hotel. They happened to walk into a bagpipe festival.
Day 12 and they found a bagpipe team practicing under a bridge in the rain. They then walked to the Glasgow Green Park in the east end of Glasgow, and found Doulton Fountain. It was given by Sir Henry Doulton to Glasgow as part of the International Exhibition of 1888. They then toured the People's Palace and Winter Gardens in Glasgow. It is a museum and glasshouse that opened on January 22, 1898 by the Earl of Rosebery.
Day 13 and more walking and sightseeing. Tony liked the look of these footbridges and decided he had to walk to them.
Day 14 and they were on a jet plane back home.
No events for September.
October brings Aftershock, 3-day metal concert. Concert number 7 unless you are counting days or bands. They probably watched nearly 30 bands. Crystal dressed the part, angry music for happy people.
A week later and Bob joined Tony and Cheryl for concert number 8, REO Speedwagon. The lead singer, Kevin Cronin really cannot sing anymore, but the music was as good as ever.
Bob also joined Tony and Cheryl for a trip to Napa. They do enjoy the private tasting room. Oh, and the wine too. They also stopped at Beringer. Bob really likes the white Zinfandel, and Cheryl likes the pumpkins.
Kevin and friends went out for Kevin's birthday to shoot at the range. You may not know this, but Kevin has curated a collection of vintage weapons. World War II and Vietnam War era weapons.
Last item for the year, Tony got pushed by a passenger on the train. When Tony hit the ground he broke the radius bone in his right forearm. This specific type of fracture has its own name, Cole's fracture. It happens when you hyperextend your wrist when falling. He spent 2 weeks in a splint, and 3 weeks in a cast, which slowed the production of this video due to his limited ability to type and edit.
Time for one of Tony's favorite features. 20 years ago. Kevin turned 6 years old, and for her first appearance in the 20 years ago feature, Crystal was born.
First Kevin, his parents often referred to him as Billy Goat. He loved to climb on rocks and anything else that looked like a challenge.
One of Tony's favorite photos of his last motorcycle.
An early photo of Kevin and Tony flying rockets.
This was the year that a 6-foot rattlesnake came visiting Tony and Cheryl.
During this time Crystal was still rising in the oven. Then they started celebrating her impending arrival.
Her cousins were looking forward to meeting her.
Cheryl got to meet her new daughter, and then Kevin got to meet her.
Then Kevin got to hold his new baby sister.
Great-grandma got her turn to hold Crystal.
Kevin attended first grade.
Family posed for their first family photo.
Kevin turned 6 years old.
Kevin dressed as Spider-Man and Crystal was a ladybug.
Tony's parents made it out from Iowa for a visit. Guess they wanted to meet their new granddaughter.
Even farther back is 50 years ago, 1969, when Tony and Cheryl turned 6 years old.
Tony turned 6 first. He even has footage from his birthday party.
Tony liked helping his grandfather mow the yard. Little did he realize just how soon he would be mowing by himself.
Tony's family made ice cream at all the family events. One of the chores that you did not have to push Tony too hard to get him to turn the crank. On this occasion, his father Clifford gave him a helping hand. Grandma was always in charge of getting the ice cream out without letting the salt in.
Tony was in first grade. September 1969, Tony fell from a treehouse and crushed 2 vertebrae. He has many memories from his time in the hospital. He has this photo of a balloon artist who made balloon animals for Tony.
Due to him missing school, Tony was told that he was going to get held back in first grade. He really didn't like that idea. Fortunately, he had people who cared about him. His teacher visited him once a week and brought and picked up homework. His grandma Snyder worked at the same hospital. She came and visited with him every day and helped him get his homework done. His attitude towards school was completely changed and he managed to stay with his class. He also learned that he could get popsicles anytime he pushed the button near his bed.
Cheryl's family had a lot more pictures of her. She seems to have liked chocolate chips.
At Easter she shared her eggs with her brother Ted.
Cheryl took up the violin.
Like most families, Cheryl's family took family portraits. If they had a tripod, they may have been able to get both Jay and Peggy in the same photo.
Her and her cousins obviously like ice cream too.
Her family posed for a family portrait. A couple different poses.
Then there was Christmas with Santa. Cheryl and Ted asking for their favorite toys and Cheryl waiting patiently for them to appear under the tree.
That is the end of the 2019 Cooper year-end video. See you again next year.